Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another stream. Tonight, I'm joined by a very special guest. Do you want to just introduce yourself to us?
Yes. Hello, I'm Will. I've been working for Dovetail for the last 3 months on Train Sim World 4, and in particular the PC editor. And before joining Dovetail, I built what's kind of known as the unofficial editor.
So a little bit of a celebrity in the modern community, aren't you?
Kind of.
You are. Own it. That's awesome. So yeah, it was great to get Will on board to help us over the summer with the PC editor, given the experience that Will's got on the editor. So yeah, welcome to the stream, Will. Will is going to be demonstrating the public editor as in the current build. So unlike the last time I demoed the editor, which was supposed to be the public editor but couldn't be because it broke the night before, this actually is the public editor, which Will has been diligently working on and testing during the course of today. So looking forward to showing you some stuff. I think, however, we need to turn over to some exciting admin, and for that I will call upon Alex.
Hello everyone, I will be your spooky admin voice in your ears tonight. So for all of you curious, the editor will be free and it will be distributed via the Epic Games Store at launch of Train Sim World 4 on September 26th. So pre-order now. If you pre-order the Deluxe and Special Edition, you are also treated to an early access from the 21st of September. All of the store links are in the description of this video. You can find that as well as our roadmaps and our really extensive Train Sim World 4 FAQ page, which will pretty much answer any questions you may have. So that's pretty much a quick admin. Matt, how about you give us an overview of the stream we're going to be doing tonight?
So tonight we're going to be doing a few things. So one thing I will say is this is not intended to be a tutorial stream. There's going to be a little bit of here's some bits I made earlier, because some of the stuff is you spend a bunch of time prepping. Like we're going to do some landscape import. We're going to show you a bit of LIDAR, but we're not going to do all of the QGIS preparation and so forth of that data. So this is going to skip over bits. We will do tutorials later on. Lucas has already said, oh, I can show them all sorts of this stuff. So we're going to be covering first setting up a new route, importing some basic SRTM DEM data, the low resolution stuff, which is what you cover your ground with, and then expanding with some LIDAR data, just so you can see what that LIDAR data looks like in the game as well, and roughly how it works. Then we're going to try a bit of track laying. We're going to put a junction down. We're going to show you some Superelevation. I'm going to show you how the track markers work. It's a bit different if you use Train Sim Classic for setting speeds and so forth. We're going to place some scenery. We're going to put a train on this little track. It's not going to be much to look at, this piece of track. No, don't set high expectations. But we'll put a train on it, and we'll show you the play in editor function, so that you can actually test your stuff actually in the editor. We're going to show you one of the questions we've seen a lot of is, can you modify the locomotives? And you kind of can. There are ways you can change things without changing things, and it'll be more clear later on. So we're going to show you how you can make some modifications to locomotives, and then we'll see how time goes. We might make just a quick little scenario in a pre-existing route as well, so that you can have a look at that as well. So I think we need to stop looking at us and start looking at the editor. So
Matt, can I quickly suggest my volume down a little bit and your volume up a little bit? Thank you.
Okay, hang on a minute. Speaker on it, Alex, so I can see where your volume is.
Hello, this is me speaking. Welcome everyone to the editor stream. There will be a lot of questions tonight. We are hoping to answer as many as we can.
There you go, that's you sorted out. Let me dial us up here. Right, okay, let's see how myself and Alex and Will fare then when it comes to talking. Do you want to just what are we going to get started with?
So the first thing we're going to do is create a new map and try and import some LIDAR data.
Go for it. Let's go. Just talk people through what you're doing roughly. Remember, folks, this is not a tutorial. We'll cover these steps by steps in detail in later things. But for the time being, we're just going to give you a sort of a quick flying pass overview of how this stuff works. So take it away. Just give us a rough outline of what you're doing.
Okay. So first I'm going to create a folder just to hold the map in. And I'll create another one called data that will load all the SRTM files into and the LIDAR data into.
So SRTM, the Shuttle Radar Topology Mission, this is where the low resolution DEM data, DEM, Digital Elevation Model. So this is your basic terrain data comes from, all of this, where your hills and your valleys will come from at a very, very low resolution level. So this is about, what, 90 meters normally, isn't it? Somewhere between 30 and 90 meter resolution. What that means is there is a point every 30 meters. So you can imagine how much data there's not in there, but it captures the overall landscape quite nicely. So we're going to just bring in these height files. And there you go. So again, sorry, carry on more.
So you can just drag them in and it generates these data sets with the data in it. And I'll create another folder for all the LIDAR data. All these files are the LIDAR.
So this LiDAR data is data that Lucas provided us. Do you know which route he provided this from?
It's from Dresden-Chemnitz.
Dresden-Chemnitz, excellent. So LiDAR data comes in all sorts of different formats and needs processing before it's made available. It can be used using, I believe, a tool called QGIS. I don't know if there are other tools out there. There's one certainly I know Lucas uses, which then converts it. How you do that is black magic to me, so I'm not going to try and explain it. But you end up with these files, which you can then import.
This is a very small chunk of Dresden-Chemnitz. It's just like the corner. Take a lot longer to do the whole route.
We're gonna ask. We're just, as I'm the I don't know much about what's going on type voice. We're just setting up the environment, the landscape. Is that right?
Yeah, we're bringing in some of the external data files that have been prepped ready for us. This is some of the, here's one I made earlier types stuff that, so we prepped some external data. The HGT files were just downloaded from from appropriate servers, the same as you normally would. Like I said, the LiDAR data was downloaded and then processed to get it into the right sort of structure format for the game. And like I said, Lucas will at some point, well, some of the team will explain that process. We're not going to leave that a black box. We will explain that. Yeah, now the data's there, I think we can make something.
Yes. So now we can go File, New Route, begin creating a new route. And I've got these coordinates that are specifically for the Dresden area. Select the folder I want the map to be in. Then first off, before I import the terrain, I'm going to remove the original light sources and clouds and bring in the TOD4, the time of day system.
Right.
We use.
So when we talk about TOD 3 versus TOD 4, this is actually literally the thing. So under there, you can see there's a TOD 3 folder, there's a TOD 4 folder, and you make a route TOD 4. But the first step of it is just literally putting this on the route. That's it.
It's in.
Of course, the big job, if you're upgrading a route now, is now to go and fix everything that broke. But that's not what we have to worry about here. Right, so what have we got? What are we looking at here? So we just changed modes.
Yes, we've just gone into the route building mode, which is what we use for importing terrain data. And then we're going to go down to this landscape tool. Select the data we just loaded up. Firstly, we'll do the SRTM files. Sets, and then
You might want to talk a little bit closer to the microphone. It's not picking you up very well.
okay,
I boosted your volume as much as I can.
I'll try and speak closer.
These microphones are very, very picky about how you speak to them. Is it coming through okay, Alex?
Yes, I think so. Appreciate everyone. We're trying to match the volume levels.
And you can see on the side all the landscape streaming proxies have loaded in. I'm And if we fly up, here's the landscape data. So this is the low resolution data from the
So if we
SI.
turn around and zoom out, so we can see these valleys just a little bit more broadly. There you go. So this is the low resolution data, and this is lodding out a bit. If you go a bit closer in, it obviously doesn't look quite as bad as that looks. But before LIDAR, this is the landscape data you would use. This is the same landscape data you'd use in TS Classic as well. Before we go any further, though, I just want to like a little personal tip here. Is, and I know it drives some people nuts, but you see the green sonar in the top right. I leave that on. That is my Unreal is thinking. If it stops animating or is animating poorly, just mouse off, keyboard off, leave the thing alone until it's come back to pulsing nice and smoothly. Because fighting with an Unreal editor when it's decided it's got other stuff going on in the background is a very unpleasant experience. So I leave that on. You can turn it off. It's obviously its purpose is to say, hey, click me. There's tutorials up here. But actually, I leave that where it is because I find that really quite useful, just as a back off. But that's a personal thing. So what's next? We're going to get LIDAR data in now.
Yes. Next, I'll select all the LiDAR data and then hit use selected assets. Yeah. And it's loaded it in up here under LiDAR source data. And then if I select all the landscape streaming proxies, because I want to convert them all to use the LiDAR data, I can right click and go apply LiDAR data, and hopefully in a minute they'll all look super detailed.
We had trouble making this work earlier on, and Lucas set us straight. So let's see whether or not we remembered.
Yes.
Look at that. You see how much difference there is in that detail, though. Some of the questions people are asking were like, can you see what's going on with the track bed and the riverbed and so forth? Oh, you might want to try, actually, is just changing the time of day more to, so if you'd bring up the console and do ts2.dbg .set local date time space and then go just 12 space 0 space 0. That's it. Now we can see a bit more clearly with the sun directly overhead. So if you just fly down, let's have a quick look at the sort of the detail that you can see in there. And this is I think a point every meter. So it's at its worst, it's 30 times more detailed than you'd have seen in the other data. So there's a lot going on there. It makes it so much easier. You can see the trackbed on the side here, and you'll see roads and so forth as well. So yeah, this is so important. LiDAR, once you've done all the processing, is quite straightforward. There is actually a tool. So if you we can't show it now because we've imported everything, but there is actually a tool which will let you use a brush. So if, say, for example, you do something with the tile and the height gets messed up a bit and you want to restore it, there's a brush that means you can just restore the LiDAR in just little bits in there. Do you reckon we can manipulate that landscape?
I reckon we can pre-share it. So if I not
Yeah, this is where we deviate from the script. Strange things happen. See, we're not root developers. You see, we do other development. So what we're going to try and do is come up with some masterclasses where some of the experts in the team will show you how it's supposed to be done. But what we wanted to do in this stream was give you a good sight of everything actually being in present. Never mind. Let's move on from that. So the idea is, if something goes wrong and you want to restore just a little bit without restoring the entire tile, you can do that. There is a brush tool that lets you just bring little bits of it back based on the LiDAR data, which is incredibly helpful. What else do we want to cover in LiDAR? That was about it, wasn't it?
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I hope that was useful, that side of things. It's good to see the data coming. Obviously, at this point, you'd start looking at terrain texturing. You'd look at you're putting your track down and all the other scenery assets to go on it. But hopefully you can see that with the terrain looking that detailed and that good, you know, a great big chunk of the job has been done to a much higher standard than you probably be able to achieve by hand, which is really good. So now, since neither of us are practiced enough with track laying to want to lay track on a real route, we're gonna start again, and we're gonna do it on a big flat square because that's about our level. So again, talk us through what you're doing, Will.
Okay, so I'll create another folder. The flat, we'll call it flat route. And I'll repeat this similar steps to before.
Except this time we don't really mind which lat long it is, do we? Because it's
No.
Switch the time of day over.
That world.
There you go.
Should be good to begin laying track. So there's a network edit mode for track laying.
So these are really interesting. Got the ribbon loft description and the track crawl. Now, if memory serves, the ribbon loft description describes what track looks like. So in this instance, you can, you know, this is how wide, far apart the rails are, what kind of sleepers, how often the sleepers, whether there's random different sleepers to pick from, what the profile of the ballast is, all sorts of things. So the visuals of the track are done in the ribbon loft descriptor. And do you want to just show us what happens if you try and edit a ribbon loft descriptor? Because this is another point we wanted to just showcase here is that if you try and edit, some of the things are, because they're cooked assets, you can't edit them, can you? What happens when you try and edit one?
So clicking on something like this just won't open. You can't do a huge amount with it other than use it in the track laying tools. Whereas something like a data set, like this track rule, you can open.
You can open it. No, you can't edit that because you can't save it. But what you could do is copy it and edit it there and then reference it. So some of these things you'll be able to do. And this is because it's a cooked asset and needing special handling. Now, over time, some of these files, we might be able to provide the ability for the editor to load them in. Some of them are just missing crucial data, so it might not be possible. So one of the things that we want to look at over time is what files people really want to edit versus they'll just make their own ones up anyway. And where we need to provide access to that in the editor versus just providing some example source files, perhaps, for example. But in the case of these track crawls, you can't modify them. You could just copy them and make your and then update it accordingly. So there is there is some flexibility to be had there, as we'll show you also when it comes to modifying locos. So we picked our ribbon loft descriptor, and then the track crawl I think sets up defaults in terms of the speeds and whether it, well, you know, if there's any overhead power and so forth in there. So there's all sorts of common things that you can apply in here. Look, jointed rail, gaps and dips, whether there's LZB on this track, what kind of sound asset it's got, all sorts of things. If it's a tunnel, the Forces internal camera tick box is the one that I know everybody especially loves. So that's where that is defined so that you know not to tick it. So yeah, so that's that. So we'll go with whatever we've got selected at the moment because let's face it, we don't know any better. And you've got some debugging, some display stuff down there. We're not going to really focus too much on that, but suffice to say, you've got quite a lot of control over what is displayed in all of this stuff and how it's rendered on the screen as well. So, and that's almost all display stuff. Now, if we go to the track laying tool. You've got a whole load of tools down the left-hand side. Should we just have a quick look through those? So you've got laying of track. It says track curves. Every track is considered to be a curve of some sort. So you've got various settings here for the track laying tool, which includes snaps and all sorts of things. You've got then the design of the track, so what the design speed of the track is and how, what kind of the cant you've got on the track. These are the debug settings we talked about earlier. Then you've got the transition between two straight gradients. So this is the thing that lets you easily do vertical curves. So that you can, if you've got two tracks, there's a track laid to a point, you can press a button and it'll turn it into a curve, a proper curve, not just 5,000 pieces of straight track. It'll actually be a proper calculated curve. If you go to the next one, this is for creating crossovers between two pieces of straight track. So you got two parallel tracks. You can just click on them, and effectively you'll get a crossover built for you in that area there. Next one. So this is just splitting ribbons. So if you want to create a ribbon for some reason, there are many reasons why you might want to do that. This is the tool that lets you just put a join in there. Let's go to the next one. So this is the joining tool. This is the thing that puts those things, tries to put them back together again. Welding. So if you've got two pieces of track laid over the top of each other, you can use the welding tool to create crossings and slips and so forth. Obviously, the angle is going to be important on that they cross at. So this is going to be the tool that lets you adjust the height, but also this tool is related to superelevation. We'll come back to this one. Track ranges or track properties. This is where you set the speed limits, set electrification, whether it's got platform markers or destinations, any physics that are unique to this area, signal detail. There's all sorts of stuff that you can put on here, and I'm going to show you actually the way that these are visualized is really quite clever compared to what you might have seen previously. And then you've got linkable objects to the track. So signals are linkable objects, cargo loaders are linkable objects, things that actually need to be linked onto the track itself. Stopping boards on platforms are linkable objects on the track as well. So in that case, you place the object and then link it to a location on the track. Next, we have track joints. So you have the ability, when you lay the track, and let's say you lay jointed track, if you want an area where the joints are maybe more often or they're different, you can actually come in here and individually remove, add, and change track joints in there. They're not actually hard coded into it. You can move and do what you like with the track joints as well. So if you, for example, you lay some track with frequent joints in them, and then you lay a junction, and actually the way that the joints have worked out, it looks like you've got 6 inches either side of a point and you've got extra junctions in the extra joints. Then you can get rid of those extra joints or move them a little bit further away or whatever you want to do. So you've got quite a lot of control with that. This is the modifying superelevation tool. We'll come back to that one in just a minute. This is again, it's quite neat. Lofting. This is where you can create loft assets that are aligned to the track nice and easily. This would have been, I think, similar to the offset tool in TrainSim Classic. Managing track sections. So this is a button we're not going to press because the last time we pressed it earlier on today, it just crashed the editor. So this is something to look into. But track sections are fundamental to signaling. So they put a second layer of information on top of the track ribbons, which tells it logically where track sections are, and track sections generally will change when junctions come up and so forth, so that it knows it will use the track sections as part of the signaling and knowing where trains are. They're in a particular section. So there might be 15 ribbons that is only one track section, essentially. We'll come back to this for a more comprehensive signaling tour, but track sections, very powerful, and they're the means by which signaling happens. OHD wiring, again, not touching this one today. We've got quite an advanced tool for setting up overhead line equipment. The way it basically works is you put the pole, the catenary where you want them to be, and then you can wire them up individually or however you want to wire them up. I think there's a default behavior in the wiring, but if you don't like the way it's wired, you can delete the wires and redo them. It's quite powerful. Importing track. So we have a tool which will let you import from TrainSim Classic's track. Don't use it, honestly. It'll give you a start, and it might be interesting to trace from, but the resulting track is not drivable. Because the way that easements work, they're calculated differently in TrainSim World than they are in TrainSim Classic, which means virtually no curves come in as one piece of track. They're all broken everywhere. But it does give you a good basis upon which to then start tracing track from, potentially. It's interesting. We stopped using this quite a while ago because we found it actually got in the way more than anything else. That tab may even disappear at some point. So, because it might cause you more harm than good. And then what's the last one down here? Hectometer boards. So this was another little wizardy tool that Lucas wrote a while ago, which means that you can much more rapidly place the German hectometer boards down the side of the track, because they happen a lot more frequently than you'll get on the hectometer boards. Tell you they're like 42 with 0 under it, and then 42 with a 2 under it. They're like the distance down the track. And there's a lot of them. So that takes up a lot of time to place, and this tool actually makes that significantly shorter. So that's a quick tour of all of the tools, and some of the tools at least. Those are just the ones on the network editing mode. So, Will, let's lay some track.
Okay.
So you notice the tool down there actually, which is giving you sort of a compass on the ground, so you can see very easily which way you're going to lay the track. And I think if you press and hold, it moves it, doesn't it? Yeah. So you can choose where you want that track to be, and then when you release, it'll start laying. So as you start laying, it's predicting a little bit further of the track and on. So if you pull it to one side or the other, it'll give you the curve, and you can start seeing it. Now we're doing smart curves here, which means it's actually doing the full entry, curve, exit with all the easements and everything built in. If you want to do the easements and curves separately, you can do that as well. But actually, in many cases, this is a good way of saving a lot of time. And it means, and you do want to learn how to use easements, because the difference when you're driving is a jolt as you go into the curve versus a lovely smooth entry to the curve. So it's well worth learning to use easements. The difference between an easement is, imagine you're in your car, and just as you start to turn, you immediately turn your car wheel 90 degrees. Versus with an easement, it gradually turns the wheel 90 degrees. That's kind of the difference in the experience. The curve radius changes gradually rather than suddenly. So, do I lay a bit of straight track first? Give us a reason, because we'll need to... you forgot to save, didn't you?
Yeah.
We'll be crashing right now.
Never mind.
We knew this would happen at least once or 3 or 4 times in the stream. It's fine.
This is a good chance to mention that this is a beta version that we're still actively working on shipping improvements to. And I think the something that we didn't mention at the start is that we're going to be working with all of you in the audience, all of the community, and using the feedback to iterate on the editor. This is kind of a joint project where we want to actively take in your feedback and build it around your requests. So yeah, we look forward to bringing more improvements and hearing the feedback you have when using the editor. And on that, actually, Matt, it's a question I want to ask you. It's something that is subjective, but it's something that's come up quite a few times in the chat and on our FAQ pages, which is just a really top-level sense of how difficult is this tool to use. If you want to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, or if you want to just kind of talk about it anecdotally, is this going to be something that me with no knowledge can pick up and just start going forward on? Do you have a recommended something that you can start with, something easy perhaps, maybe just a simple 1 mile, 2 station kind of base project?
So what I would say is, this is professional game development tool. You know, AAA games are built using Unreal Engine. So on the upside, you've got unlimited power, to quote the movie, with what you can do here. And you'll be able to come up with things we've not even thought of. We are so buzzing to see what people come up with. On the other side of things, this is not an easy tool to use. This is not designed to hold you by the hand. The file and then new route is about as easy as it gets for that. And then beyond that, you kind of have to know where to go and look for things. Once you get the hang of where things are, you should actually find the process quite straightforward. It's I'm no kind of a hardcore developer, and I can get used to these tools relatively quickly. But it's not welcoming. Think of it as a fairly steep, short, vertical learning curve. Once you and you're going to need to really put your learn on. Get used to the Unreal tools. So go and watch some how to use Unreal Engine editor videos right now. Well, not right now. Watch the rest of this stream and then go and watch them. And get used to how Unreal works, because fundamentally at the core of it, this is the Unreal editor. Because learning keystrokes will help you speed up things an awful lot. There's not a lot in the win menus along the top there: file, edit, window, and help. So you're going to be sitting there floundering a little bit at start, going, "Oh, well, what do I do?" So watch our tutorials as we put them up there. Look at the tutorials for the base Unreal Engine, because that might give you an idea. If you're familiar with Unreal Engine, you shouldn't have any problem getting to grasp with just how things do things, because Unreal developers made, our team are Unreal developers now, and they made the extras and plugins and so forth that this uses, as well as many core engine changes that are involved. So in terms of projects to start with, I would start by doing a little bit of gameplay, make a little scenario, make a little timetable, and get used to that process. And then if you're going to start making a route, and it's not for everybody to make a route, then do something quick. Do something really quick. What you want to do as a goal is kick the tires on, excuse me, every aspect of route creation as fast as possible, and don't make your first route a 75-mile, well, that's the only route that makes sense, so I'm going to do that, because you won't know what to expect. You won't know if there are things that you should have been doing before, and you have to go back and redo things. Make that first route 1 mile with maybe 2 stations at either end, or something like that. Fictional or realistic if you want to, and just kick the tires on that whole end-to-end process, because that way when you come to make your 750-mile route, you'll know what you're getting into. You'll know how long it takes to put the scenery down, and that's not an Unreal Engine thing. Making scenery in routes like this is just time-consuming. The number of projects I've seen on Train Sim Classic with the tools, where people lay track for hundreds of miles, and then every project fails because they just can't stomach laying the scenery for it. It just takes so long, because it is a long job. It's one of the biggest jobs that we have in making the routes that we do. So get used to that and size your project accordingly. You might find there are things that work that you'll enjoy doing and things that you don't enjoy doing when you actually come to do it, and therefore you can come up with bigger projects which do more of the things you like and less of the things that you don't like. So go into it with your eyes open, and be humble, because if you get it wrong, you just get frustrated with it. But stick with it, learn the tools, will help you. It's incredibly satisfying and rewarding when you actually get stuff working, and you see your creations up and about and driving through them.
Wise words.
New section of track.
Cool. We got track. Right. That's it. End the stream. So one of the things you can see as Will is moving there, you can see beyond the tasteful pink bit of the track. That wasn't my idea, but I love it. Then you can see just after that, you can see where it goes off straight, and that's reminding you that at the end of this curve is straight track, not more curve. If you had easements on, there's additional guides about how far more you can ease it or less you can ease it, or what the curve radius should be, so that you can then lay the fixed radius curve that comes after the eased bit that you've done. And so these tools will then guide you and tell you, and so you can see where it's going. So if you need to line up something, from point A to point B, and point B is maybe 2 or 3 bits of track away, you kind of can see a bit more of where it's all headed, which should actually make life a lot easier. I think it does as well. So it's just going to lay a curve somewhere. There you go. So that's a curve. That curve has got easements on it and all sorts of things. So that's actually quite a complex curve. It'll have 3 pieces of track involved in there. Actually, no, because that'll just be an entry and an exit, I imagine, being quite short like that, won't it?
Not sure.
Yeah, it looks like an entry and an exit. So we're going to put some super elevation on it then. Yeah,
okay.
So it's the height tool, wasn't it?
That one.
We can click the node.
Then over here you can...
So you can type things in and get all sorts of precise, so -4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Depends. I can't remember which way round the last curve we did was. There you go.
Yeah.
So we've super elevated that curve now. So you can see, if you zoom into it, you can see what's going on with that as well. And that's super elevated around the inner rail as well, rather than the middle. So, and the benefit of easements combined with super elevation is that the easements will also ease in the super elevation and ease out the super elevation. So, that will now be quite a nice smooth ride as you go. In fact, it'll be completely smooth ride as you go from straight flat track, eased into the curve, eased into the super elevation, and then eased back out again onto flat track at the other side. And if you made the track in sections yourself by laying the easement, laying the curve, maybe 2 or 3 easements, 2 or 3 more curves. There are examples in the real world where, it's rarely as simple as just an ease, a curve, an ease. And quite often you'll find that some of the track I know that we've found as many as 4 or 5 different radii of curve in the same apparent curve. And you have to ease every time you want to change radii. You'll need to use an easement to change between the radii so that you keep that lovely smooth transition as you go around the curve. And this will handle all of that. You just click each of the nodes, set it up to the super elevation that you want. Now, there is another trick that Lucas showed us, isn't there, which was quite neat, where you can use this super elevation tool and just twist the track. But this does it down via the middle of the track, not the inner rail. But it means that you've got a little bit more dynamic way of handling it. Now I know that in Train Sim Classic you get 1 super elevation per track roll, and I think the ideal is you'd only really use 1 track roll. Although I know some people have got ways of making it use multiple. But what this is saying is that every curve could be its own super elevation level. There's nothing related to that now. You just set them up the way that you want them to be at that point. And things like the design speed, cant deficiency, and so forth can mean it can do some of this stuff automatically as well. So that's super elevation. So we do a junction.
Yeah.
So if we hover over to our straight bit and we just stick a junction in. Actually, should we just switch to fixed radius curves instead of easements, just to make our lives a little easier? Curve type.
Oh, yeah.
That's it. Should we change that to circular arcs, and then we'll drop a junction in. Again, you can see the slightly different variation of the tool. So if you pull that out, that's it, all the way. That'll do. And then we can just label a couple more just so that we've got a couple more bits of track just to get it out of there. You notice it's yellow when it's snapped, and it's different color when it's on a curve. If you want to do, if snap is getting in your way, you can choose the snap radiuses so that you can, and to the point you could get rid of the snap if you want to as well, or you can make it more sensitive if mostly what you want to do is straight track. So yeah, let's just put a bit of track.
Extend that down a bit.
Yeah, just make our lives a little easier. Cool. Right, so we've got a junction. So that junction, what kind of junction is that? It's not any kind of a junction right now. We need to sort that out. It's going to need some sort of levery business going on, I think. So where we need to find an appropriate asset. Search for junction. I think that was it.
Yeah, I think this one will do.
Just drag that down. Let's lift it up. Right, so what does it look like? Doesn't matter what it looks like because it's a bit smarter than the average junction. So if you see that black triangle, that is the junction node. So what we need to do is align the junction first. So if you click pick junction and then give it onto the black triangle, it's now clicked it. You notice a GUID has appeared down there. And what we'll do is on the track junction, if you just click flip track side, what you should see is it's now snapped directly to that. So that fixes that up quite nicely. And if we change the row name to manual, then it changes the asset as well to a manual asset as well. So that's now a manual junction, all set up, ready to go. So what we could do actually now, just to prove that all works, is if you want to go, save.
Save before it crashes.
Right, and then if you click the drop down on play, and let's just make sure we're set up and good. Yeah, current camera location. Good, go ahead, click play. Play in editor. wait for that for just a moment. Notice the green thing has stopped doing its thing. There you go. Right, so you can walk up to that junction now, and you can interact with it. There you go, fully working manual junction. And if you want to make it an automatic junction, you can just flip that asset over to make it an automatic junction. If you press the 9 key, you can bring up the map as well, so you can just see the track, you can see the junction that we're on, and you can make the changes there as well. So this is, making junctions is pretty straightforward. It copes with all sorts of things. Most types of junctions you can think of are done. It's all procedural. If you're familiar with Train Sim Classics track laying, kind of the idea of laying a junction is very similar. There you go. So one of the things I will say, though, is that when you're in the editor, so this is the play in editor functionality, which is actually really powerful. It means you can actually play the game in the editor. So if you're testing something, you haven't got to effectively make it a pack file and then go and bring it into the game to then go and play it and test it. You can just run it straight here. There's a number of benefits for that. One is obviously speed. I mean, that was much easier, just pressing the play button. You can pop that out into a separate window that it runs somewhere else as well. I personally prefer it just running in the editor like that, but everyone has a different way of doing it. You've got options, standard Unreal options. But you can also do debugging. So if you've written blueprints or you've got timetable mode that's running, you can call it up and you can see the stuff running in the background. Simulgraph for locos, you can see that as well. So I think that, and the last tip that I'll give on this particular bit is the mapping of the escape key. Yeah, everyone will suffer from this numerous times, and eventually you will learn. And when I find out when that eventually is, I'll let you know. But if you want to bring up the pause menu, what would you be wanting to press instead of what you're expecting to press?
Shift Escape, otherwise.
Shift Escape, because what does Escape do?
It exits play and editor. So
it exits play and editor. So you'd be in the middle. A number of times I've set stuff up. You're like, okay, we're 10 minutes into this. The train is where I want it to be. All right, okay, press pause. I've pressed escape. No. And then you've got to start again. So yeah, Shift Escape will get you the in-game pause screen. Just want to show that like that. And then press come out of it again. So Shift Escape, folks. Shift Escape. Because if you just press escape like this, it takes you back out into the editor again. But it's all nice and fast. That's one of the things I really like about the play and editor functionality. It means that you can prototype stuff and test stuff really, really quick right there in the editor. It does actually play the full game. So if you go into, when you first load the editor, you are in the default map and you should just be able to press the play button right there. I don't know if we've tested that inside public editor yet, but that's the intention.
It does work in theory.
It does. There you go. In theory, it's got the seal of approval. So, so we've shown some of that. Do you want to just show what scenery is like to play? Should we just pick some bits of scenery? I mean, I don't think there's anything too wacky in terms of how scenery works, but just to prove you can. So this is a lot of this stuff, by the way. We're taking stuff from packaged routes. This is not source assets. All we have put on this is the editor. We haven't got source assets or anything. We're using the stuff from Steam, the Steam build that's installed on it. So this is exactly what you'll be doing and seeing and so forth.
I think it's also important to note on that is that you can also you can actually get a lot of assets for free using something like the Epic Games asset library.
Yeah.
So there are ways of getting free assets that you can use in your project so long as you've got the right permissions in the I mean, if you're just using this for your own personal projects, then yes, that's completely fine. But always make sure. But there are many ways of getting usable assets.
Yes, exactly. And if you know Blender or any other a standard Unreal supported 3D tool, importing Blender assets is trivial. At some point, we'll do a work tutorial showing a bit more of that. Because, for example, one of the things that you can do is, there you go, so this is splines. One of the things that you can do is you can let's say, for example, you've made up some track and you want to and you've got a bit of terrain nearby and you want to do a bridge over the track. You can actually change the track to a static mesh, which it isn't at the moment. This is all procedurally generated. You can change the track to a static mesh, which is just like a normal 3D model, and then export that scene, including the track, to Blender. Then you can draw what you want as if, in a full 3D tool. Get rid of all the stuff that's already in editor and just bring your bridge or whatever it is that you've modeled straight back into the game exactly the way that that it wanted. So say another example, let's say you wanted to bring a coach, and you wanted to model something which perfectly goes around the coach. You can just extract the track and the coach into a single FBX file, which you load into Blender, and then you can do your model around it, get rid of the coach and the track, bring it back in, and you know it's completely correct. I think this is also how some of the station stuff gets done. You just extract the track and the terrain, build the station in Blender, and then just bring it in one go. It's the reason for doing that rather than splines, which you can do. You can build stations as splines if you want to. You might need to build those splines yourself, because I don't think we do that. But the reason for doing it like that is it's significantly more efficient that way. It's a bit more time consuming to build it, but you get a lot more control over it, and you can and the resulting thing is going to be more efficient because it's a single asset. So worth learning to use a tool like Blender or your favorite 3D tool that Unreal supports. They should all work fine with this. So we've got splines in there. We've got Play and Editor in there. Shall we just quickly drop a train on this?
Yeah.
So let's go and create a timetable.
I'll just create a timetable here.
Before we jump any further, I would love to steal you for a few minutes to answer some commonly popped up questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. Let's hold on this so that we can talk over it as we do it. Yep, go for it, Alex.
So the first one we've seen a lot of from when we earlier showed some of the LIDAR data. Now, to clarify, we pulled in some that we had in the oven. You know, we'd already pre-cooked it. We're hearing a lot of questions in the chat at the moment about how would they go about getting their own LIDAR data or their own landscaping data. Now, there's a little line here saying that you can import lines and shapes from KML and OSM, but can you use stuff from Google Maps, for example? Where is the most accessible place to get that landscape data?
So Google Maps is where you would create your KML files, and all of those are supported. So you can bring data in from KML, bring it in, and then it just becomes lines and so forth on the world. So if you want to trace the track or highlight where roads are or do anything like that, you can do that. Google Earth Overlay is supported here as well. You can see the icon there on the top row. Well, I don't think we've got it set up on here to actually work, but you can put your API key and so forth in here, and that'll turn the Google Map overlay on, so you can see that as well. For terrain data, for SRTM data, and regardless of if you're going to use LIDAR, you need to start with SRTM data. So get the SRTM data for it, because you'll only effectively LIDAR the stuff that's close to what's going on, and then the DEM will pick up the distant. So you put the SRTM data in, and then for your LIDAR data, you'll find a source for LIDAR data. There is no one source for LIDAR data. It's all over the different organizations that are collecting the data and gathering it together, and I don't know where those are. Again, this is something we can come back to you on with recommendations. We've in a couple of cases paid for LIDAR data because it's not free in certain regions of Germany, and other places times we've got it for free because it is free in some of those areas. So like the UK, there's a fair bit of LIDAR data, but it's not complete. So LIDAR is a growing resource. It may be that you have to make do with only SRTM data if your area isn't covered with LIDAR. If it is, then you'll need to find out where you can get that LIDAR data. Once you've got it, it then needs processing with a tool like QGIS. What that processing involves, I don't know, but we'll cover it in a tutorial, and then you can then use that in the tool itself. So that's probably not really a helpful answer, but it's about as much as I can give. What we need to do is do an actual tutorial on how LIDAR data works and a little bit of a GIS, Geographical Information Systems, GIS tutorial, just so that you can understand that a bit better. But essentially, once you've downloaded the data and processed it, it's that easy to then get it into the game.
Brilliant. And just a quick one on, can you explain what cooked assets means? I have no idea personally. Like, what will I be able to have access to and what won't I? Kind of top level.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, Will. My understanding is that a cooked, when we make assets, they are the source. Yeah, they're the source assets that we edit and we make. Now, for example, bring up the timetable that you've got there, Will, and let's start making a timetable. Just drop some assets onto the screen, right? So you can see we've got some stuff going on here, and we've got some stuff linked together. So when you want to edit the file, it's got information that says what the XY coordinate of that is. So if you move that formation around a bit, it's kind of, you want it to stay there, don't you? So if you shut the file down and load it up again, it's set that. You can set the colors of things, and if you press C, you can add comments, and you can set the color of that comment, and this is all really cool, and it helps you understand what's going on, and you can really make a lot of, some cool stuff, and all the blueprints are the same thing. When you run the game, do you think you need that information at all? No, you don't need any of that information, but it's taking up memory, quite a lot of memory, in fact. And so the idea of the process of cooking, which is a standard Unreal process, is it looks at every asset and basically says, what do I need of this asset to actually make the game work? And what is it that's only needed to make it editable? And so the process of cooking is optimizing and rinsing all of that data out. So you end up with the cooked version of the asset, which has nothing unnecessary in it. And the reason for that, it reduces the size of the downloads. It, more importantly, reduces how much memory is taken up. It will reduce how much time is taken to load that asset, and all sorts of things. So it saves and helps on a number of different fronts. So that's why cooking happens and what cooking is. And it's like I said, it's just part of the standard part of Unreal. The problem is that you are trying to edit, if you are opening our files, so if you go back to the main thing, Will, and just scroll to the top and just collapse the folders down so we can see the plugins. You see things like these folders here, the ones that have their names, like Dresden Chemnitz content. That's the root of Dresden Chemnitz. And then you've got the root gameplay content, which is where all the service mode and so forth is in there. So these files are not in source form. These files are in cooked form, and they're being drawn on by the editor from the package files that you downloaded from Steam. So the data's not there. So when you try and open some files, like I said, the data is simply not there to be able to do it. Now, we have started adding the ability to load some of these files in. So, for example, do you want to just show us a file that we can load in? So maybe a data asset of some sort. Content manifest should load, shouldn't it? So there's the content manifest. So this is a cooked asset that you can load and look at. Now, you can't edit it because it's stored away in these package files, but you could copy it and use it somewhere else if you wanted to and make changes to it. So because there's nothing really got rid of from this file, it kind of needs everything to make it work, so you can load that. The biggest ones that are going to be affected are timetables, blueprints, semigraphs, because there's a ton of data in there which is got rid of because you just don't need it. So to make those editable again, you kind of have to make up the positioning of them and auto flow them essentially, and it would probably look a complete mess even if you did that. So that's some of the things that you can and can't do with that. If you double click on a file and it does nothing, that's why, as we just did earlier on that Will did earlier on there. It's trying to autosave the timetable. So, yeah, assume that you can't change anything. If you can load it, you can copy it and change it. Your copy should be fine. Obviously, you can make anything. So if you make all of the stuff yourself, there's no limits, which is what our team do. They make everything themselves. So they'll be able to, if you start from scratch and make your own things, then the sky's the limit. There's no limits on what you make. It's because of the files coming from this cooked file format that we spent, probably a good chunk of the time trying to make some of this stuff loadable and so that you can see it. What we'll do is we'll finish off doing this timetable just to prove a train running along this line, and then we'll load an existing map in, which is probably one of the biggest achievements with the editor, being able to load a cooked map, all materials and everything. So we'll come back to that. So what's the next? We got any more questions, Alex?
That's a solid one. A solid answer to how we use the cooked data. So thank you for that. The other one I would ask is, how does underground tunnels work? Is that something that users will be able to use in the editor if they've brought in LIDAR data?
Yeah, so you can cut holes in the landscape by means that I don't know off the top of my head. You can cut holes in the landscape, and then you can, so if you wanted to put a tunnel mouth in and then build a tunnel spline through the tunnel, for example, or do anything you like under the ground, essentially, then you can do that. But the interface effectively is done by making part of the terrain transparent so that you can go through it.
Brilliant. A lovely quick answer to that. Right, I'll build up some new questions, so feel free to keep asking them in the chat where we've got the mod team and we've got myself trying to answer as much as we can, but we've also got a stream to continue on with.
Cool. Right, shall we go back to our timetable?
Okay.
We have our timetable here, and
First, you might need to create a route definition.
yes. This is another one of these hidden places you'll find so many useful things in the when you right-click and create miscellaneous data asset, and there are so many important things that you need in there. And again, once you know where they are, like if you want to make a formation of vehicles, for example, that's in there. A timetable is its own thing. You can pick that off the menu.
I think that can be left.
Sorry?
I think all of that stuff can be left for now. It's just the map that's important.
You can set all sorts of stuff in that route definition. It's a really important file. It's got, so for example, you can link up what the UI presentation of the route is going to be and all sorts of things. So let's have a quick scroll down. So we've got, theme is where I think all the UI data is information. Thumbnail texture. The resume texture is the one. So if you're resuming a scenario on that route, you can use that. Route map override is so you can spot where the route widget thing is. Max speed is just metadata. Route details is some metadata. Collectible groups where you can define, if you place the collectibles, you can define them here, and it's just a list of IDs, due IDs. Loading screen images for when you're loading on that particular route. Temperature curve, so this is the throughout the day what the temperature is, throughout the year what the temperature is. The station directory, you'll list all of the destinations. This is where you can specify the loading and the lighting curves and so forth. So, for example, this is one of the mistakes in some of the routes we've done. In the station directory, the end points of a route are marked as terminus. The problem with a terminus station is that they are set to unload all passengers. So, what if you start at the terminus? First thing it does is unload all the passengers. Yeah. So that's a station directory function. There's a number of things you can do in there. PIS is driven by the station directory as well. So if you want to go to, I don't know if everyone remembers in Southeastern for a while there were trains that actually came up on the PIS saying they were the Medway Explorer or the Medway Wanderer. That was set up in the station directory as a destination. So there's all sorts of fun you can have with that. And you can set your characters, some of the characters up here. We don't really use a lot of this stuff so much anymore. The outfit temperature curve is so that you can determine at what temperature they switch between the warm and the cold clothing. And what else have we got? Rules. Is this an off-the-rails environment? Currently, Training Center is the only one that does that. What that means is that by default, magic happens and power always works. And that's the only thing it really matters. You can specify, you can fix a date. So new date is used to allow, so Nidatal Barn, for example, always starts at a particular date, whereas normally the routes will use your system date. So you can choose how you want that to be. Scalability is a number of settings relating to performance. Then you've got, I won't worry about things like objective composers, and similarly the timetable settings. Generally, you won't need to use a lot of that stuff. But that's just a quick overview of what's in the route definition. So let's get back to our timetable. So you have to tell the timetable what route it belongs to. The timetable name and description are used if you've got multiple timetables. This is the name and so forth that's used in that instance there. So we'll create a formation. What a formation should we make a formation actually? Let's show that. If you go back to main and just make show a data asset, and let's make a train formation. And we'll just put a couple of things in it. So a test formation or something.
So what should we stick in it?
So let's expand that and let's have I don't know what we've got installed on here. 363. I think this is pretty much German stuff from the last stream. So let's do that. So you can pick, and you see a list of all the formations that are provided in the system, and this is where you can make your own ones. So in this instance, you've got a number of stuff down here. Is that you can flip it, you can add cargo to it. Substitution is where you can set up whether liveries will work or if actually it'll allow other things to substitute. So the 204 or class 08, depending, up to you. And it's just all you're saying here is I am allowing something to substitute in for me, and then these are the criteria it must meet and how likely is it to happen. But we'll leave that stuff off now just to make life easy. You can set up train numbering overrides for this particular formation, so you can override it. So in this formation, it uses a specific set of numbers. Block train probability is not something we use so much these days, but is a very, very cool feature. You may remember, if you've been playing the game for a long time, that Sandpatch Grade used to randomize the freight formations. So block train probability is one of the settings that allows it to do that. So if you set that, then effectively, if you have a train of, say, 50 auto racks, and then set this, it will then randomize that train amongst the freight cars that are available, and it will set it up as a fairly sensible manifest train. So you can use it to randomize the freight cars in each time. However, the problem with doing that, and the reason we don't do it anymore, is that substitution of wagons raises their cargo loads. So all the trains become zero loaded. Now, if that doesn't bother you, this is a cool feature. If it does bother you, don't use this feature. Some of these other tick boxes are related to whether it can appear in menus. So if you've made a bit of a formation and you don't want it to appear in menus, then you can. This is one of the places you can use for that. So is substitutable unit, is drivable, and so forth. So the required DLC plugins at the bottom is really important. So if you have made a formation that must have certain things loaded in order for this to work, this is an add-on manager thing, then you set this as the list of things that should be in there. And then this will tell add-on manager, before you load this formation, make sure you've loaded all of these other things. And once they're done, then it'll load the formation. So we'll leave that as it is for now. And that's that. So if you collapse node 0 down, and let's just add a wagon behind it just so that it's more than just one thing. And if we stick have we got a ruse on here? ROOS? Yeah, have we got a single ruse? Should be an RVD version of a ruse somewhere. It's got 10 loaded, 10 empty, there's 5. There you go. The rail vehicle definition is always obviously a single entry. That will do. So if you collapse that and save it, and let's go to our timetable and set that into there. So now demo formation will appear in this list here. And you can see that it's got the 36C and a ruse T sitting in that list down there. And let's place it on the route somewhere. So you can either do this in the 3D world or on the map. So if you click, click and find somewhere to place it. And what you'll get is, so you can see that the 363 is actually at the front. So what we might want to do here is flip that. So let's go ahead and change the spawn facing. That's it. Double check behind. We're still on the track. Excellent. So it doesn't render the whole train. It's a more optimal way of rendering. So you can just see the outline of the volume that it's in, and then that does that. So now in theory, that's all we need. So if you compile and save that,
I'll probably need in service or
nope,
something. Okay,
that should be enough for it to do its thing. We're not going to make the train. We're going to drive the train, so it's not going to make it drive on its own. And then if you go ahead and click play, when it again, we're going to be in the play and editor environment. So that's it. So it's play and edit timetable. That's it. It shows at the top, doesn't it? Yeah. And there you go. Train on the route. You can now drive and do as you wish on that. So, and if you wanted to make that, actually, if you press stop, let's just make the train go somewhere. So bring that up, do a go to, and then an end formation, an end service, and then set that go to somewhere. And then take it off one of the spurs. There's our route map. And again, you can do the go tos either way. Let's now set it. Now, if you deselect that, Just click somewhere on the view space. That's it. Click compile. All right, now reselect it and go and have a look at the route map. You can see it's actually given you a rough outline of what that'll look like when it's in that place. Really, really handy if you're moving a train out to a point and past a switch and then you want to move it back again. You can precisely see where it's going to be at that point, which is something we didn't have in the early days, which is why, for example, if you remember back to the early days of Sandpatch Grade or the early days of the old Northeast Corridor route that doesn't exist anymore, where the moves were really exaggerated. And it's because they couldn't visualize it like this. This is a massive help. So that's roughly what it's expecting to do. So in theory, if you actually change the start time of that service to 12 o'clock, that's it. Let's compile and save that. And then close that. Or minimize, that's it. And then if we do a ts2.dbg .set local date time, we said 12 o'clock, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So set the time to 11:59:50. Press return. Oh, and then go ahead and run it. See how fast that is. Once it's got stuff loaded and ready, it's all done. And what you should find is at 12 o'clock, off the train toodles. You'll have to do AI startup first. It's definitely not going to make things. There you go. See? Told you it wouldn't make me into a liar. So you can set this up to do, this is where you'd set up, using that timetable file is where you'd build, that's the start. That process that you've just seen there is the first 2 minutes of the 12 or 13 weeks it takes to make a service mode timetable. Where you start routing trains and telling them to go places and loading and unloading passengers or shunting and so forth. Shunting is really clever with this. If you go ahead and stop this and go back to your timetable file, and what we'll do is we'll make the train pull forward a bit. So if you
Location for it to
change the location for it to be just forward a little bit. Actually, we could be clever here. We could be even cleverer. Change the start location onto one of the branches. That's it. And that's the right way around. Yep. And what we'll do is we'll change the stop location clear of the junction. Right. And what we can do now is if you bring the route map up at the same time, and let's zoom in and let's just compile and save that and just work out what that looks like. And then click on the objective. So that's clear. That's actually quite nice. Yeah, you don't want it too close, right? And what we'll do is we'll now do another objective to back you up down into the other junction. Again, compile it, and then re-click on the objective. So this is a problem. This is something that you will fall into. That main 3D window must always be available. It can't be on another tab. So you take the route map and just pop it. That's it. And now when you press compile, it doesn't have to be like you can like scroll it off the screen even, but you cannot have it on not as the current active tab. Otherwise, it doesn't calculate things properly. Right. So if you that will mess you up several times. It messes me up still. So yeah, if you so click on the second stop at location, we'll prove we're okay. What we'll do now is an uncouple. So let's drag an uncouple instruction off. This is particularly cool. If you've been used to how this sort of thing works in TrainSim Classic, I hope you'll see why this is actually very neat. You notice there's 2 pins coming off of this one. One of them is your active formation, which in this case is the wrong way around. So we've said it that we're going to uncouple the loco from the ruse, and we want the ruse from the loco. So we want to uncouple one from the back, not one from the front. So change this formation into back. and then check the bottom, and you can now see that the service rail vehicles is the 363, and the Ruse T is then the formation. So that's what we leave behind. So if you now then bring the loco forward, so back past the switch. You need to compile it for it to see it. That's it. Now you can probably tuck that back in a bit because it doesn't need to be that far away from the switch. Yep. And then we'll just leave it there, to be honest. We don't need to go into too fancy. But then if you wanted to do something later on with that formation, you just literally drag a pin off it. If we just drag a pin off of the formation, we're not going to make this work, but if you drag a pin off, if you notice that there's a couple instruction here, if you click the couple instruction, you'll notice there's another pin there for that. And effectively, this is how you then couple wagons together. So it takes a formation, it takes the service train, and then it will make them work together. And you just say that couple front of service to back of formation. So you need to work out the most complex thing of coupling is working out where the front and the back of a train is. It's not always intuitive, particularly if you have it to coming out of portals backwards. It starts getting very confusing, but you will figure it out and get used to it. This is actually it makes making quite complex shunting maneuvers and so forth, like the ones you'll have seen in Sandpatch Grade and Rosig 363 stuff, actually, much more understandable because you can sort of follow the line of the what's happening with these rail vehicles through. So anyway, if you just quickly get rid of that couple instruction, and then if you just want to compile it, save it, and let's just prove it works. Of course, our train is over on the right-hand side now. Oh, of course, what we didn't do is reset the time, but it should just mean it gets on with it anyway. So when we talked about debugging previously, if you double-click on the timetable and show the timetable now, we can see what it thinks it's doing. So you can see actually it's not doing anything. So what we need to do is to reset that. So if you stop that now, rechange the game time to 11:59:50. You should just be able to up arrow that. Press return. Now rerun it. And what we'll do is if we just keep an eye on both of them together, what you should see is that the timetable starts highlighting to indicate what that train is doing. So you can actually debug some of this stuff in real time. And this is true if you've got many trains going, because you can define as many trains as you like here, same as you'd expect. There you go, see? Service just woke up. You can see where it started. You can see what the current step is. And it will tell you this for all of the active services, so you can see what's going on. You can see it moving. And you'll see it completing the objectives, at marking their arrive at and completion time as it goes. Now, just because we're a little impatient, we could just do a Slowmo 2 here, just to speed things up a little bit. So you just bring up the console command, type Slowmo, phase 2, and that doubles the speed of the simulation. I would not recommend going above Slowmo 4, because otherwise Simograph kind of gets, well, you can't predict on any of the results. If you watch the Junction, did it change the Junction yet? Interesting. You changed the Junction. This is probably because we've set the route up wrong. So there's a thing for normal traffic movements, you've got a thing called a dispatcher, but we have a thing called a yard dispatcher. And what I suspect is in this instance, we've probably not got that set up quite right. But I think we've kind of shown the basic outline of what's involved there, even if our example hasn't quite worked the way I would hope it to. So you can see live debugging of timetables, and how you can just run it all inside the editor, which is very neat. Before we move on, Alex, any questions?
Aha, I've returned with a list. So some of these feel free to answer quickly, or others that you feel like could do with more of an explanation. I think the first one that is interesting people at the moment is how does modifying and extending existing routes work? And I know your response is going to be quite harsh on a no, but I've seen that there is a but to this, and I think talking about that's quite important.
Yeah, so extending routes, I would say, is a no. Short of the community coming and showing us why we're wrong, I'm not certainly aware of any way you can do that because it involves editing things that are cooked and can't be edited. But there is. Do you want, Will? Do you want to talk to us about scenery layers?
Yes, so like in scenarios, you can add extra scenery to the route. There's also a mode for overlaying scenery just globally that was originally built for mastery overlaid tiles, but you can use it to add extra scenery to basically any route. You just can't move or delete existing scenery.
You go, Alex.
Brilliant. Is there a limit to how long a route can be?
We're not aware of any limits, so no one's made any. But your limit is more going to be your sanity. I've got to be honest. We've not got any coded limits. The entire track database is loaded into memory at all times. That's going to be a limit, but it's not a huge amount of memory even for a larger route. So it's like it's a theoretical limit. One thing I'm not 100% sure on is whether we still have. In the early days of Train Sim World development, we had multiple origins, and the reason for that is because Unreal uses a flat Earth model. But without cats, so everything stays on the Earth. So, whereas obviously the Earth is not; it's a round ball-y thing.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, never mind.
When you map from a sphere to a flat plane, we do that using a fairly standard technique called a universal translocator, UTM, and that works to a point, but what happens is that the further you get away from the origin you've picked, and this is the origin that Will was typing at the beginning there, the further you get away from it, the more error starts to creep in because things are supposed to are curving, but they're not being curved and so forth, and there's not really any way around that. Now, for a good 200 to 300 miles, that's probably not a big deal. But with the ultimate caveat that the longest route I know we can make is the longest route we have made, which I think is Kassel Würzburg. But I would imagine if you're staying within the same UTM grid, then which is something like, depending on where you are in the world, something like about 300, 400 miles wide, somewhere about 800 miles tall, then probably, that side of things will be tolerable. And yeah, we don't know what the longest route that you can make is. We are excited to see people trying to make really long routes and seeing where they get to with it.
It is going to be exciting seeing the community limit test the editor. But thank you for the answer for that. Are you able to modify sounds as well? Stuff like train horns, bells, ambient sounds. Does this apply to existing content, or is this something that you'd have to implement yourself?
Well, that's a nice segue into the next section, isn't it, really? Although we're not going to be editing sounds, but we'll give you some hints as to some of the things that you can do. Shall we edit a train?
Yeah, okay.
Take a quick break from the questions, and we'll just show you what editing a train looks like. It'll give you some idea as to what you can and can't do with it. So we're going to take a 363, and we're going to hack about with it. So just want to explain what you're doing.
So when a blueprint gets cooked, it becomes a compiled blueprint class, and you can't do a huge amount with that because all the data, like the nodes and their positions, are all gone. But one thing you can do is create a child blueprint class from the compiled blueprint. And that means you can override parts of the blueprint. So you could, for example, maybe change the brightness of a light or move the light slightly. The main limitation is you can't see the original blueprint scripting, but you can also override existing blueprint functions.
So if you want to give it extra behaviors, you could do that, but you couldn't change. Well, I guess what you could do is completely replace what an event does, or enhance what it does, couldn't you?
Yes.
Because it's up to you when you do that, whether you call the parent function or not.
Yeah.
You can add the call to parent or not. So if you just want to make it do an extra thing, so when you put it in forwards, it also turns a light on, you could just do this and retain all the existing behavior. If you want to do, if it's doing things you don't think it should do, then you're kind of on your own, but you can stop it calling the parent function and then write your own behavior to do what it needs to do. We're kind of in the realm of, be interested to see how you get on with it, to be honest. It's the stuff there is flexibility here. I think, I don't know how editable sounds are. I don't think they are particularly editable, but potentially you can replace them by some of this stuff. If you go back to the RVV, I believe in some of our trains the RVV actually, you look at your child object there. There is audio data in here, I think.
Sure where
No,
it
I'm
is.
not particularly sure either. So it looks like it's all the visual stuff. So RVV stands for Rail Vehicle View. One thing that would really help you in understanding how Train Sim World is structured is to go and look up the phrase Model View Controller, or MVC. So Train Sim World is built around that. So alongside with the RVV, the Rail Vehicle View, you will find that there is an RVM, which is the Rail Vehicle Model. The difference is that the RVM is always loaded when the train is moving around, and therefore it doesn't create. It's got no visual element to an RVM, whereas so it makes it quite cheap to have in memory, but it gives it the basic physics parameters and tells it simulgraph and all the rest of it. Whereas the Rail Vehicle View is exclusively dealing with the visual and audio side of things. And then we do have a thing called an RVA, which is in some of the newer trains, which is the Rail Vehicle Audio component. But that's not present in all of them. Some of them it's merged into the RVV, from what I recall. So it's so it'll be different, but I'm interested to see what people can do by doing that. In some cases you can right click on it and create a child object, and then you might find that unlocks the ability for you to override behaviors, but that's not changing the existing locos. So if you create a child of a BR363, you're creating a new 363, so you potentially put new textures on it, you could potentially change the behaviors of the train, but then if you want to use that, you'll need to then either use it in the free roam, or you can use it in scenario planner, or you can use it in timetable mode via substitution, or in your own scenarios, that kind of thing. So but you can't change the exact instance of it. You're creating a new instance of it. Is that all correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
To help, Alex?
It does, yes, thank you.
What's the next question?
So this one's interesting. Is it possible to create a guard mode scenario like we saw on Midland Main Line?
Yes. So obviously editing an existing guard mode scenario and understanding how guard mode scenarios are built, we might need to show you how to do that in a tutorial, because you won't be able to open the files up to see. But when you're creating your own scenarios, again, if you are creating new, there are no limitations. So you can use everything exactly the same way that our team do. And so making a guard mode scenario, I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that. Now, with all of this stuff, I reserve the right to be proved wrong in the harshness of the real world. But from what I understand of how these things work, I'm fully expecting that to be possible. Any type of scenario you've seen our team make, you should be able to make, and you should be able to come up with even different and wilder ideas yourself, because through the objective system, which is done through Blueprint, you've got the full power of Blueprint. You've got a AAA game engine here that you can use to empower what's going on, alongside of the tools that we provide in the system for the objective side of things. So, the world is your oyster. I've got some really funky ideas that I'm definitely not telling engineering about, because they'll growl at me.
Fantastic. And one more that I had on my list, and I'm looking at you, chat, to send in any more questions that you have. But what is the default track speed limit that you've currently got on this editor?
Actually, that's something we skipped over, track markers. So why don't we go ahead and switch back to network edit mode and switch to the track marker tool, which is the one with what looks like a H on top of it. That's it. And you'll notice that we've all of a sudden got all sorts of craziness going on in here. And so I've switched off most of the visualizations, and so that you've only got the speed limit being shown there. So what we need to do is mark some track. So if you go ahead and mark a bit of track up. This may look familiar if you've used Here's Classic. You can see that this is all set to 75 miles an hour. So if you take the bit that you've marked and make that 30 miles an hour, right, you can see how that bit has now been marked. I'm not quite sure I only did that bit, but it's because it's hidden under the other bits, I guess. Yeah, it is there.
Yellow bit.
Yeah, okay, just an unfortunate selection, really. So you can see how the visualization. So if you select a different part of the track, you'll notice also that we selected it like from this point to that point, right? And we changed that to, let's change that to 15 miles per hour. Right, you can see the speed of the arrow changes, the color changes. Now mark the exact same section, but in the other direction. So mark the end for the other end and then this end. Close enough. And then let's set the primary speed limit on that way round to 45 miles per hour. Right, so you can see you've got independent control of the different directions on the same piece of track as well. And you've got the visualization of what's going on with that stuff. Now these markers, if you click the eye there to turn off the visualization, you can go back to the normal track, but then you can turn on all sorts of things like whether the electrification information. So if you click electrification and turn it on, and then you can see what's going on there. If we now tick the third rail box, you can see that there's something appeared in that section. And then let's make that scroll up, and let's make it third rail side is left. There you go. So you can see the green line has appeared there to tell you it's line side left, and pick up is a top contact. Now, if you shut the eye off on the electrification, notice how the third rail has appeared. Oh, has it? Oh, this track doesn't have third rail. Okay, if you had track that had third rail set up, which this doesn't, then actually the track itself would now have third rail on it as well.
Not sure we got any.
I don't think there's anything third rail actually installed. Overhead doesn't create anything visually because you need to add the wires in separately, but third rail, it will do it based on this. And similarly, the left and the right is chosen with this as well. So, yeah, that's the, so if we go back to track markers again and have another look at what else you can do in the markers. So again, you can choose what the voltage and frequency is for your third rail, the overhead supply voltage and frequency, fourth rail supply voltage frequency, whether it's AC or DC. And then that'll need to match up with the trains that you want to run on it as well. So you can set up your overheads the way you want them to. Markers. So let's make this a siding. So if you click the eye on that one so we can see what it comes out at, and we will change the display name to siding 1 and the marker name to siding 1. And we'll make that a instead of a destination, make it a
Lost it.
Lost it. Where did it go? Oh, it's popped up to the top, helpfully. Change that to being a siding. And there you go. So now if you bring up the route map, you'll see that it's done a really good job, actually. Maybe we need to save it or something. I'll deselect it so that it saves it. I don't know. But in theory, that's what would make it actually then do its thing. There you go. So that's then made it where that's how you get things marked up with a different type of there. So let's have a look at the track marker tool. What else have we got to look at there? So you can add ancillary loft descriptors. I can't remember what that's used for, so we'll move swiftly on. Got the electrification. physics, so track adhesion, and track unevenness. So you can make, this is where you would set, for example, an area of low adhesion. So if you've got if you've got some overhanging trees and you want to make this less adhesive, then you can force the adhesion of this particular bit of track lower. And then track unevenness is what gives you the bumpy, bouncy effect. Or if you've got like modern rail, then you can remove the effect entirely, pretty much from there. And you can, what else have we got here? The joint gaps, you can set up and configure what the joint gaps are like, what kind of a dip you get in them. The dip stuff is something that will come in the suspension work that comes later on. In the signaling section is whether or not that section's got LZB. You'll probably find if you tick that, it'll actually appear. Again, subject to be proven and utterly wrong. We'll need to deselect that section.
See it just about.
Oh, you have to turn off the marker. You can see the LZB has appeared down there. So if we go back to the marker, there you go. So the LZB wire has appeared there. So that's how you make the LZB wire appear. We picked German track, so it does German things. So let's go back to the markers and have another look. Marker section up so that we can see it. I'll do. Scroll down. So you can change the sound asset for a piece of track as well. So if you're going over a bridge, you could change it here as well. There's some other stuff you can apply here. Whether this is a tunnel, you can note that. That will actually, I think, affect the UI and tell you where you are. And yeah, there's the much loved Forces internal camera setting there, which, to be honest, I recommend you use if your tunnel is so tight, like on the Bakerloo tunnels, because otherwise the camera just bounces and flies everywhere. If your tunnel's big enough to support it, then yeah, don't use it. And you can see also there's a number of settings down here, like auto gapping, third rails and fourth rails, so it could do all that for you. Makes it nice and easy to apply. It'll automatically set up, I believe, things like on third rail and fourth rail, the entry and exits to them, so they don't just end up, the ramps effectively will get done for you as well. Yeah, I think that answers that question. Alex?
It does. It definitely does. We do have quite a lot more questions that I would like to fire through quite quickly.
Are you telling me to
But
give
there's
quick
also-
answers for a change?
Well, I mean, detailed answers are very good, so I'd rather we give as much detail as we can. But this is a really important one because I don't think it's been asked too much. But it's talking more about how this editor, part of the purpose of this editor is also to be a gateway for new potential development partners to getting into developing content for Train Sim World as well. And so Matt, the question really I want to ask for you would be, how would they best go about realizing the opportunity to become a third-party developer for Train Sim World?
So first thing is, it's not just about third party, it's also about second party. So second party is where we come to you and say, hey, can you make a scenario for us? We'll pay you. Or can you do this bit of a loco for us? We'll pay you. Third party is you make a train or a route or a scenario pack or something and say, can you publish this for us and pay me? What happens? So basically, first up, learn the tools. Get some comfort with the tools, know what you're good at and how long things will roughly take you, what kind of things that you can do within them. And then if it's a third party project, I would say, make sure you've at least done that first mile, that first test project, so that you've kicked the tires on the whole thing, and then come and talk to us. One of the things we need to set up a better approach for is how you can get in touch with our third party team. So we'll come back to you by the time this thing comes out, so that you've got you can know how to get in touch with us. But in the meantime, just message me if you need to, and tell us about what you want to do. And then we can give you some advice. We've got a lot of knowledge and experience when it comes to the shape and size and style of packs, and we know whether there's, you need to think about adding more, or whether, there's other ways of looking at what you're doing. And we can provide advice and guidance. A lot of it isn't hard and fast rules, but we can certainly tell you what we think, how we think it will work. And then between us come to an agreement that, you'll be comfortable with and happy with. And then you go away and make the product, give us updates to it. as it goes on, and we can provide regular feedback. We can give you advice and support from the team, and they look at helping you with like one of the things we've done with Just Trains is several opportunities. We've taken what they've done and put it on consoles and streamed it back to them over a private Discord server, so they can see how their route is looking on an Xbox One, for example, so that they can see that stuff. So we can provide help and support in all sorts of different ways. Ryan and our third party team is brilliant at providing a lot of documentation help and support and so forth. Now, we're obviously looking at providing general help and support via forums and so forth anyway, but the difference is when you're a third party developer with an active project, we can provide you, if necessary, direct access to the development team, to either to give you the understanding of what you need to do, or in a couple of cases actually make some fixes that will help it make it easier. We've certainly done that in the past. So yeah, and then once you've got, as your project approaches completion, it will then go through our QA process, ultimately then get released via on Steam and other platforms. And then for second party stuff, say for example you're not quite, you've got the time to commit to a complete pack, but you'd like to sort of work with us on some stuff, you can just let us know, hey, I found I'm pretty good at scenarios, here's a few that I've written just as an example. And then if we get a window where we're like, what we really need is a scenario author to help us, and I'm picking scenarios as an example, any aspect of the game development applies, then we'll go to people, and we do that amongst the third party developers and other people we work with, like Will Green, who hasn't produced third-party packs but has worked with us on a number of second-party projects where he primarily does things like semigraph physics. So Will Green worked with us, for example, on the F125 for Antelope Valley, did the semigraph setup for that. And they become small, manageable things which focus on the bit that you're really interested in, and mean that we can work with people that will do that. Now, there might not always be second-party projects to work on, but it's really exciting that the range of people that can help work with us to make the tools better, can maybe help provide, if you're an American author, use your knowledge of American railroads to provide more authentic content and help us do that, and we want to work with you on that stuff. And I think that pretty much is, it's a lot of opportunity there for working with us, developing your skills, and doing second and third party work, as well as doing your own thing, of course.
I mean, it's an amazing answer. I mean, the kind of top level of it is that we want third party and second party devs to succeed, and we want to make sure that they kind of get whatever they want. And we will work with you on that and work with everyone in the community to make the editor the best it can be.
Yeah, I think everybody, we all want to make great train content, and we want to play great train content and enjoy it. So one of the things I'm excited most by about third party development in particular is third parties will go places we won't. Or we'll do things in local territories that we don't have the expertise for. They'll take Train Sim World into really exciting places and give really unique, different experiences. And, we're here to help.
Brilliant. And something I'll actually take over and answering, and it's quite a big part of the kind of editor ecosystem, essentially, is how will sharing work? And Matt, if you want to add on after me, feel free to. But at the moment, there isn't an official way you can share. This won't be linked in with the Creators Club. But we will assist and help the community share that as much as possible. One of the ways we're going to do this is by restructuring the forums. The plan is, and it's not currently there, but to have a dedicated space for editor discussion and editor sharing. And that might mean that you might upload things to your own personal drives, or maybe there would be websites created dedicated to uploading and sharing these assets. It's not something that we're hosting, but it's something that we will support, and we will definitely try and help showcase some of the best stuff created through the editor.
Perfect answer.
Brilliant. But now here's something for you, Matt, and this is a big one. But I think you can answer it. So the first part of this question is, can multiple people collaborate on the same route if they use, say, a shared repository or a network folder?
Yeah, so Perforce is the repository that we use, and that's actually free for a small number of users, I think 5. You can check on their website. So the point of shareability is to the root tile. Remind me, how big is a route tile, Will? Do you know? Something like a kilometre. I think it's a square kilometre, I think. So a route is made up of an awful lot of these tiles. Do you want to, while we're talking, do you want to go ahead and load up one of the routes, actually? Because we can use some of this as an example. Yeah, so the way that the way that Unreal works with Perforce, because Perforce is built into Unreal in terms of the client access. You see the source control tab at the top there. So you can imagine you've loaded the route and it's all synced up via Perforce via some means. Then as you make a change, it will check out that route tile. It will mark it as you've got exclusive access to that. Other people will be able to read that tile and so forth, but they now can't change it. And so you'll make changes, and then when you're done, you'll go into the Perforce client and you'll submit those changes. And there's no reason why 15 people, or 5 in this case, if you've got 5, the minimum user license, can't be all working in different parts of the route. And that's exactly how we do it. Now, if you want to be in each other's backpacks, that's going to be more of a problem. There's no way of doing that. So the way that our teams work is they will create a tile map, and something we should really work at how we show you how we do that. But we create a tile map of the route, and then the tiles are divvied up. So, from here to here is going to be developer 1, from here to here is developer 2, and there's a gap between those sections. And they'll busily work away filling up their tiles with scenery. And then at some point, when people are away from the gap tiles, those will be assigned to a developer to fill in the gaps, the 1 kilometre gaps in the middle of each tile grouping, and then you end up with the whole route finishing. So there are definitely ways of doing it. It's how we do it. We know we have quite a lot of people sometimes working on the same route. Actually, will that work? There you go. So this is an example of, this is what the route looks like. It's Dresden Chemnitz, and you can see, how many tiles there are there. So that's yellow square as a tile. So you can see that, there's a lot of scope and possibility for people to just take a group of tiles and work on that area, and for different people to work in different parts of the route quite happily together. Stunned Alex into silence.
Sorry.
He's so impressed.
Brilliant. And just in addition to that kind of question, is there also a way of, say, having root version control, like previous versions, that you can revert
So Perforce does that. That is one of the reasons you use a source control system like Perforce. I'm saying Perforce just because we use it. There are other systems out there that work as well. But yeah, with Perforce, effectively, you let's say, for example, you make a change. Or someone in the team makes a change, and that change has caused problems for some reason, you can go into Perforce and revert that change, and it'll just go back to the previous versions of those files. And because every change is put into something called a change list. So let's say, for example, I make changes across 4 tiles, and I've done something wrong or used a bad asset, and the route is now running really bad on performance. So you think, actually, let's just revert that. You can just revert the change list, or you can revert the individual file. So it's just like, I'll just take that whole thing out, and we'll look at it. And then you can go back forwards again. It's a really powerful system, and version control in a source control system just gives you a lot of flexibility. There's no such thing as deleting anything, essentially, in Perforce, because if you delete it, you can just roll back to bring it back again. And if you roll it back and then want to unroll it back, you can do that as well. It's another thing. If you want to look at team working, then really get your learn on about source control systems and work out which is the one that's going to work best for you and your team. I'll say Perforce is used industry standard by a lot of games developers. There are other systems out there like Git. I imagine Git will work fine with this, but I've not tried it myself. So work out what's going to work well for you, and just try it out. Say, take something that lay some track and then put some scenery down, and then change something and think, what's going to happen if I revert that and undo that change? Oh, the route still works and it's gone back the way I want it to. Get used to those processes. It took us some time in the early days of working out, what the rules were, the rules of engagement, if you want to call it that, for building and editing and working with it and being able to roll back. And actually, again, using our experience with the way we do it in Perforce, incredibly powerful, very flexible.
Amazing. Now, I've got a set of questions that I will answer, and Matt, if you feel like you need to step in or correct something I say, feel free to. But it's mostly so that we can say that we've answered as much as we can from our FAQ page on the forums. So, coding in the editor, that is blueprints only in Unreal. You cannot use C++ or C#. That is correct. Is that right, Matt?
That is correct.
Brilliant. Documentation and guides. So we will be ideally, we haven't actually set anything in stone yet, but the plan is after the launch of Train Sim World 4, we're going to start bringing in people who know how to use the editor very well, specific parts of the editor. And we're going to be doing ideally short masterclass sessions, content that we can upload to our channels, also live streams. Essentially, we'll have tutorials and ways of talking more about the editor and showcasing features of the editor as well. It kind of goes hand in hand with learning Unreal Engine 4 as well. So if you can supplement yourself with tutorials for Unreal Engine, that will help. But we will do some of that as well, and we'll kind of work together. And I'm hoping that this will also bring in more community coverage and community tutorials as well. There's a big ecosystem we really want to work in here, and that's between content that already exists and tutorials that already exist for Unreal. Also, content that we can create and tutorials that we can share, as well as community created content that you can share. And that relationship will hopefully be able to share as much awareness and use case for the editor as possible, really.
So yeah, that's perfect. But one of the things I'll add to that is that Epic have a channel, they use YouTube username of Unreal Engine, and they should be your first port of call. They're really, really good videos. They'll teach you everything from the basics, and it's worth learning as much as possible from what they cover, because things like how to make a door interactive that you walk up to, click, and it opens. Well, there's no reason why you can't do that in a scenario in here, or by creating animated assets that you can click on. You've got the full power of Blueprint. So, in theory, you have the full power of Unreal at your fingertips. So the more you learn about how Unreal works, and then learn how you can do with this, the more you'll be able to get out of it, and the more unique, interesting, and cool stuff. Some of the stuff the gameplay team have been doing recently with things like clicking on NPCs to talk to them, or the guard mode stuff, or there's some stuff coming in TSW4, like on Antelope Line, where you'll see some really cool stuff happening. It's because the team are challenging themselves to dig more into Unreal, not just into Train Sim World's version of Unreal, but just general Unreal. If you want to put cinematic cameras in, you can do that. If you want to apply post-processing effects, you can do that, as you saw in Liverpool Crew, where we did the black and white grainy effect. So definitely go and have a look at the tutorials. One of the really strong benefits of using a standard game engine like Unreal is there is so much information and knowledge sharing going on, already on the base tools. Brilliant.
Let's talk about assets. This is going to be quite a quick one, but assets imported from, say, Train Sim Classic, can you get them onto the editor here? And really, it's just if you have the source 3D models, or assets at all, like they could be texture packs or sound files. If you have the files themselves, then it's no different than just if you created it now. It's just a file. So yes, you will be able to bring them into the editor.
Yeah, if you've got Blender files that you made to export, then great. If you're talking about wanting to bring in, unpacking a .ap file and bring out the 3D files, I can't even remember the file format now, it's been so long. No, you can't bring TS Classic native files in and bring them in. But if you've got the source things, then yeah, as Alex, as you say, it's no different to if you just made it yourself in that respect.
Yes. Now this is a fun one, and Will Marshall actually showed a proof of concept on the forums, on one of the forum threads about the editor, and it's talking about model railways. And so yes, you could in theory create a small route. I don't know, the only thing that I don't know that Matt, you might be able to share some information on, is whether or not they actually shrunk down the track or they increased the size of the room to make it give away that kind of Holiday Express feeling.
I think it was exactly the same as Holiday Express. It's real scale trains in an enormous room.
Yes, that makes sense. So yes, you can have a bit of fun and make some really creative, different types of routes, just like when we did with Holiday Express, where you're on a tiny little model train around a big living room. I know this is another important one, which I'm going to answer as best as I can. I'm not sure if we'll have much other input on this, but when it comes to licensing limits on what you can create, if it's something for you personally or that you wish to share freely and personally, there shouldn't really be a limit. But if you're planning to create something that will go on as a third-party developer or second-party developer, then you will have to kind of adhere to the licensing limits that we have to at Dovetail, which can be restrictive in some cases.
Yeah, I guess one of the key things there is, can I charge for my content? So if you want to distribute your content for free, then you can kind of do what you like. Distribute it via any means you like. If you want to charge for your content, it needs to come through us. There are a number of reasons for that. One of which is it's part of the stipulation of the Epic User License Agreement that there's a royalty to be paid that we need to comply with. So that's just a fairly important reason, but it's a reason nevertheless. So there are a number of factors there. But yeah, if you want to do it paid, then come talk to us and about the third party program. We are looking forward to hearing from you.
Exactly. And that is everything on my list in my document. We've answered some questions from chat. I'm sure there will be some that we have missed. I want to say that if there's a question that you have asked that we've missed, feel free to ask it now. But if we have missed it and you're maybe not here anymore, head to our forums. We will have more threads talking about the editor. We'll have the Q&A thread that's still active from tonight's stream that will be then repurposed into just a general Q&A about the editor. We'll make sure to answer that as best as we can when we can.
So just before we finish up, Will loaded in Dresden Chemnitz earlier, or Hamburg Lübeck, sorry, earlier on. And I just wanted to just have a quick fly around. So, this is the real route. It's loaded it in, textures and all, so that you can see what's going on. You can run this now. Press F5. No, on the route map. So if you click the route map, if you don't see the track, press F5 and it reloads it. So you can see that this is this route, and yeah, you'll notice it's got destinations, and no, they're still not present in the shipping game. These destinations rely on data which vanishes when you cook them, so that's why it's not working at the moment. So we need a new way of doing these destinations, but at least it helps you when you're in the editor, seeing where things are and what's going on as well. So, but yeah, you can fly around the map. This is how you'd make scenarios for these tutorial, exactly the same way we made that quick timetable earlier on. There's a bit more to it for a proper scenario, because you want to set objectives up and pop up messages, which is done using a blueprint. And that's a bit more involved and a lot more coding in Blueprint than for a stream like this. But no, I just wanted to prove that this is loading. As I said, we haven't got anything on here which is source assets. This is all loading from the installed Steam, which was the one I built for last week's Vorarlberg stream. So it's just loading the DLC that we had installed from that. And yeah, you can see it loaded in, running great actually. It's in the editor there at about 37 frames per second, which is pretty good, to be honest, for the editor. There's a lot of extra stuff being rendered on here, which is what causes that. It's more than usable enough for what you're trying to do. So yeah, you can see the walls of doom that end the session here and stop you walking places. So it's great being able to load everything in. It means that you're free to make scenarios, or if you want to make a complete new timetable, go for it. You can make timetables as well. That's it from me, Alex.
No, I did want to check. I may have gotten lost in the endless sea of questions. But did we do a bit of a gameplay section? Did we demonstrate PIE?
Yes, we did. We covered off the when we made that other train go. Do you want to just spawn a quick? Let's do a quick timetable on here. Actually, just to prove that you can do it on a stock route rather than one we've made ourselves.
Yeah. Okay.
We just make a quick timetable. Just make a timetable and we'll show that. So in this instance, the route definition already exists, so that you can pick up the route definition. Let's make that 185. 185 light. That will do.
Just leave it like that? Or...
That'll do, yeah,
Yeah.
for the purposes of this. And then if you go somewhere and then spawn in. Actually, one thing we'll show after we've done this. One of the questions I saw was, is it possible to do like a wireframe mode? So, if you're trying to see an underground and so forth. So we'll show you. Actually, Unreal's got some really cool visualization techniques that you can apply to help you see things in the way that works for you. I don't think any of our team use anything other than pretty much this mode, but every developer is going to work differently. Takes a bit longer to load in the full deal of a real map. But you see those options in the top left there. So the perspective, lit, and show are where you can choose different things. So there's an unlit version, there's a wireframe version, there's, I think, a version without any textures on it. Which is, the unlit one is going to run faster, for example. So if the frame rate is chugging a bit on your computer, that's actually worth calling out as well. In terms of system specs, you really want to be looking at a bare minimum 16 gigabytes of RAM. If you're developing routes of any notable size, then you pretty much want to be looking at, 32 gig is a sensible minimum. 64 is going to be your, you shouldn't need more than 64, obviously. There's always going to be a benefit with having more memory, but I think our team have got the maximum 64 gigs of RAM. 32 is generally comfortable. 16 is workable. Anything lower than 16, expect slowness. But yeah, you can see, aside from some of the textures there for the imposters not loading, you've got your spawn there, so that can be a full timetable. This what we've done here is drop one formation, and that can be the full timetable. So if you come out of that now, and let's show some of these visualizations. So if you look at under the lit thing, you've got sort of unlit, which takes this TS Classic view. So it takes all of the extra lighting out, which is a faster way of looking at it. Then you've got the brush wireframe, so you can see what's going on. That can be a bit of a performance hog. Detail lighting, so you can see, it's just effectively it's monochrome, so you can sort of use it to see how the light and the dark is working on a scene. Let's have a look at some of the others. Lighting only. Some of this starts moving. Why the benefits of it are more something you'll see from the dev team can explain it. What are the reflective surfaces like? The player collision views, so you can see where collisions are more clearly. What you're going to bounce into. So lots and lots of options and so forth. If you go back to lit, and then under perspective, you've got some different options there. So you can look at orthographic views. You can look at all sorts of things. I don't think how useful any of that stuff is compared to perspective. But they're there if you want to. And so you can have 4 views and so forth as well. There you go, look. So you can look at the world in the way that's useful to you and your development. So if we go back to perspective, and then look at the show tab, you've got things here. So you can turn things on and off here. You can turn off the atmosphere. You can turn off decals, fog. You can turn off the grid. You can turn off, you've got full control over what is and isn't shown, as well as adding extra debug information onto it, all sorts of things. So there's lots of power in here for controlling what you're doing and what you're seeing. I guess the rest of along the top there, we've got some options for whether or not you're toggling between a ribbon or a track proxy, which is quite useful for when you're working on track. Then you've got, what other kind of overlays and so forth unique to it says TS2. Remember, that's the old code name for Train Sim World. And then you've got the compass and the lat long. The compass and the lat long are something that were added by Train Sim World when we started with Unreal development. And in fact, only until recently, there was no such thing as a world coordinate system that was based on reality in there. So this is all stuff that the team added. And you can type in a lat long and press the play button there to jump to it. The rest of what's on there pretty much is fairly standard Unreal. You've got Snap Actor to Network, which you can use for if you've got something like a tunnel or you've got something relevant to the track, you can snap it to the track actor. So it makes it nice and easy to place these things precisely on the track rather than sort of just generally placing it. You've got jump 2 points around the route, so you can quickly leap around the route. Get Google Earth, and yeah, the rest of it is fairly standard. I think scaling and so forth in there. So yeah, quite an advanced set of tools, and quite a lot that we've added to the base tool set specifically to support real world creation and train games.
And there we have it. Now, Matt, unless there's anything else final you want to show, that runs us to the end of what we had planned for tonight.
Will, have we covered everything?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's good. Right, is there anything else you want to finish up with and tell people before we wind up?
Yes. So, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead. I've not got anything to say.
There you go.
Brilliant.
Take us out, Alex.
I put the admin hat on too early. I'm sorry. Okay. So the editor will be distributed with the launch of Train Sim World 4 on the 26th of September. You can pre-order now. There are some amazing discounts you can get, up to 20% on consoles and up to 25% with loyalty on Steam. If you pre-order the Deluxe or Special Edition, you get the early access from the 21st of September. So if that interests you, all the store links are in the description. You'll find both parts of our roadmap and our massive, extensive, wonderful FAQ, facts and questions. Sorry. For any questions you may have, they'll be in that document that Chris has made. It is amazingly long, but we hope you've enjoyed. We've answered as many questions as we can. If there are any questions that you still have on the editor, we have our form pages which are ready to be used. And please share them, because we're looking to really answer as much as we can, share as much knowledge on this. And when it comes to the release, we're looking forward to seeing what you all create.
Totally.
That's it from me.
Lovely. Well, I want to send a big thank you to Will, both for the work that you put into the editor, which has been fantastic and got it in such a good place. Thank you very much. But also for coming along on the stream, doing a really good job. First time on the stream and done brilliantly, I think.
Thanks. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's good. So, yeah, that's it from us. Thank you very much for watching, folks. When's the next stream, Alex?
The next stream is in 2 days. It'll be the Antelope Valley Line preview stream. So if you're excited, make sure to check out our YouTube channel and you can notify yourself of that as well.
Go. In that case, folks, we'll see you on Thursday. Thanks very much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.